Hey everybody, we're here for the investor update, and I'm here with Kirk Gamley, who's one of the founding members of Chemistree. And I know everybody wants to know, is the stock price going up? But before that, I want to first ask you a couple questions. And number one is sort of like a little bit about your background, maybe explain to people that don't know where you came from and why Chemistree.
My background has always been in venture capital markets for the last probably about 15, 16 years. I've always really enjoyed marketing. So previous iterations, when I first was going through university, I was in the hospitality and bar business, and I enjoyed the excitement and the flair of it, and very people orientated. That gravitated me more into doing, sales and marketing for Bank of Montreal and ultimately for Coca-Cola, which if anybody probably does marketing well, it's the Coca-Cola company. Yeah. And in working there, I ran a pretty large team, but then immediately had a real interest in stocks and the public markets. And of course, Vancouver is kind of a hotbed for venture capital markets, some good, some bad. But there's no denying some of the biggest trends that have ever, in businesses that have ever been founded have originated, a lot of them in Vancouver, and quite frankly in Canada. Canada is the number 2 largest market in the world for speculative and investor capital for small cap stocks. So obviously number 1 being the United States, and number 2 is Canada. We've had the advent of, we've had diamonds, we've had technology, there's been a number of different, the big commodity boom obviously was key to Vancouver and laid the foundations for a lot of what Vancouver even is now and how it's evolved. I mean, probably it's the 2 things, is real estate and stocks are the 2 things in Vancouver I think that we're probably the most well known for, besides beautiful ski slopes and wonderful climate. Other than the rain.
And then cannabis came.
And then cannabis, which has been, everybody knows the legends of BC, BC Bud and that. So sitting what I do in my path is about 5 years ago, sort of after the birth of my first son, I really realized I'd done very well in the commodity-based business, and so did my group of partners that are also involved in Chemistree with me. And I kind of look at it very much like a family-oriented business, and that my best pals and my brother, everybody is all involved in it. We switched to doing business that were only revenue-based. And we sort of said, enough of doing these, the new trendy businesses, what's hot, what's not, and stuck with very meat and potatoes businesses that, make money or certainly on a very good path of revenue to ultimately make profitable and EBITDA. So what happened really with Chemistree was, I ignored completely everything that was going on with cannabis. I knew obviously that we have incredible cannabis people in BC and in Canada, but I really did not see the opportunity of what the Canadian market was going to bring. What changed my mind on that, and if you want to say, was in talking to yourself and the founding members of the Chemistree team, who all are basically American or U.S. based, largely.
I'm a dual citizen.
And
yeah.
Dual, which has been very helpful, obviously,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Because you're able to see both sides of the, both perspectives. Yeah. So once I started getting familiarized with the industry and I saw it taking off in Canada, I know enough about markets to know that when we did a fair bit of research and you remember we went to different conferences and looked at the legal aspects and all that. We took the business very seriously, like any business that we get involved in, with Contact Financial or in our consultancy businesses or marketing businesses. We have limited time. I got 2 children, like this, we can't be scattered all over the place. So Carl, Doug, myself, yourself, we went down, we went to numerous legal conferences and did, a lot of background work, like just in order to even recognize, in due diligence, is this an industry that we want to be involved in? And I think that's important, because what you get a lot of is when easy money is there to be made in these sectors. So if Vancouver has any downfall, it's that, cannabis is hot, let's get involved in cannabis. And that's not at all, and proof of that I think is very much like, even though people were imploring us to get involved in things in Canada, and that's where the hot trade is and things like that, we've always been, from day one, we've never deviated. Everything has been about the United States. Despite having significant issues, in the really early days of even travel, like people were afraid to travel across the border, be associated with cannabis. So it's sort of come from this sort of black to gray to, more into the white market. Now we still face a lot of those challenges in the U.S. market, with the flow of money and opening bank accounts and all the different things that go on with that. But that's the opportunity. When by the time kind of everybody's doing it, it's too late. And so in our initial analysis, we just looked at the Canadian market was not going to be of enough size. I believe very strongly that the Canadian market is going to be very much like the banking industry here or the telco industry.
And I just didn't like the regulations that they were putting on it with the marketing and and especially you coming from the marketing side, how it's ridiculous. It's not the same playing field. And I personally like how the U.S. has done it. It's more free market. It's if you know how to grow, if you know how to brand a product, if you know how to run a business, you can be successful.
You're free as the entrepreneur to differentiate your business, differentiate your products.
It's a much better market.
Yeah, we all know brands is ultimately what is so critical in establishing a business, a name, and particularly whether you're going to be an MSO or multi-state and things. So, in the challenges that we now face in the U.S. market, which is the still federally illegal, the movement of capital until we had obviously the historic move of the House of Representatives putting through the Safe Banking Act. I still think we're probably another year or so away before we really get some clarity on how all that's going to go. And what typically seems to happen, and I think what's frustrating a lot of people in the U.S. market is we seem to make 2 steps forward and sometimes 1 step back when they re-clarify it or somebody comes out. Jeff Sessions came out and said something that then pulled everybody back in, and then somebody else comes out and says, okay. So you have a little bit of that push-pull as the industry is still growing. And I remember when we were down visiting one of our other founding partners, Dennis Hunter, who is a legend in California and probably the biggest operator in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And when we asked him, we took an investor down from Europe, and he asked him, if this was a baseball game, because you're American, if this is a baseball game, what inning are we in? And Dennis sort of looked at him, and Dennis is doing incredible run rates and has some of the best products I think that you can possibly get in the cannabis industry. Everything from bottling all the way through to vape pens and edibles and CBD. I mean, if anybody, he's the person to model yourself after. And he said, we haven't even decided on the rules down here yet. If it's a baseball game, we're not even in the first inning. So certainly from an investment perspective, we're probably further along than that. But I think the point taken that we are in the early days, not over. Now I think when
that was my big takeaway from when I went to New Jersey and visited Nico. I'm in a bit of a bubble being up and down the West Coast, and I travel a lot up and down.
Yeah.
And all I see is, sort of a more mature type of market. I couldn't believe it when I went over there and to see that there's still nothing going on. And that's one of the biggest markets. So that really excites me about what we're doing with Nico.
Yeah, I think the East Coast is, to your point, Nico is obviously a legend in his own right on we sort of have the way I look at it is if we were running a national organization is we have East Coast legends and West Coast legends, right? And we have yourself, Sheldon, Dennis as our sort of West Coast base of operators, and then you've got obviously Nico out on the East Coast and his experience with High Times and with the Cannabis Cups and his work with all the different universities, Rutgers and everything is just, it's you can't pay for that kind of experience, and we don't. We've sort of everybody's come together as a family to bring something to the table to advance this business, and from a stock perspective, that's kind of what we saw the opportunity.
Can I ask you a little bit about the stock?
Yeah.
Because one of the things is, when I wake up in the morning and I see the stock, it's not like I stare at it all day, but it's a little concerning about what I've been seeing and it dropping. I'm like, can you tell me about what's going on, or do you feel what's going on in the market? And is there anything I should be concerned about? Is this going to turn around?
Totally. Yeah. No. So typically, and that's a really good question, and I understand it, and sometimes we're not as mindful of it in the capital markets because we deal with it a lot. Stock market is always a forward-looking instrument of some kind. It's either ultimately they say the market kind of gets it right, but the market is either very forward-leading either way, and that can work for you and against you. They can raise valuations up to extreme highs, and it can, hammer valuations way low. It's a pendulum that always swings too far one way or the other. And then ultimately, once the business is more mature and the industry's mature and there's viable metrics, they get it right, and it gets to working within a very narrow frame. Where when it's a new coming out industry or new type of business, then that's very difficult to find. The calibration is very difficult, and that's what we're seeing in the cannabis business. So, a few different.
Currently, right now,
Yeah.
the cannabis industry is just down everywhere, right?
Yes.
So as of this day, we're talking right now.
Totally. So I was looking and if you want to draw the tech analogy of the tech era and the boom bust and the tech wreck, I think peak to trough, the Nasdaq was down at its absolute height, down 83%. I might be off on that. It might have been 79% or something like that, but we're somewhere in that range. Last that I saw, the marijuana index was off some 73%, and that was even a few weeks ago, and it's still dropping. So, if you ask me, are we at the bottom, or well, we're certainly closer to that than anywhere near the top, obviously. So I think we're starting to level off. What we're seeing is what always happens, whether if you've seen diamonds, commodity-based products in industries, tech, is when we're in the interesting part now where after you've had the hubris and the investor excitement, and because of the illegality and a lot of the ways that cannabis is allowed to be invested in, particularly down in the States, it's been very, very retail driven. And by retail, I mean there's not a lot of there's no pension funds, there's no big institutions. They're all, particularly in the States, it's illegal for them to even be involved.
They can't be involved
at all.
At all. So we haven't even seen that money come in yet.
That to me, when I look and assess something from an investment perspective, is where's the next level of money coming from, right? And so it's hard enough even clearing it down the States. I mean, a U.S. stockbroker for his clients can't even buy. He would be fired the next day if he bought a cannabis stock, even if So even if it trades on a Canadian exchange.
How are people buying it now? They have like an E-Trade account.
Exactly.
They're buying it. Okay.
Yes. So that's what's happening. Why you're getting these wilder swings. So what happens when you have very sophisticated investors and institutional investors and strong support for stocks through broker dealers and things like that at a large scale, like the bigger S&P companies, the Amex, the Nasdaq, is that allows some fluidity and a little more consistency to the price because the volumes are greater and you've got institutional investors and retail investors. You've got this big swath. So what we have right now really is dominantly retail investors. So this entire industry has been funded by people that may understand it or exposed to it or read about it or whatever. That's causing that generally tend to trade much more emotionally, right? And that's not a knock. That's just the way it is. But what happens is you get these wilder swings in emotion. Like we've seen it, like absolute hubris of everybody thinking this is going to change the world, to the same person 6 months later is like, well, this industry's bunk is all over, and and it's far from over. As we've talked about, I think it's just starting. Right?
It's certainly not. I mean, that's the one thing I think is really interesting, because I don't stare at the stock all day long, and for people to say, like the world's going to end, and I'm like thinking, really? Because almost every operator that I know, first of all, is a good operator. I'm not talking about bad operators.
Yeah.
And they're doing really well, right? Everyone's doing really well. I mean, obviously, I'm right in the middle of doing a sugar leaf update video, which is going to blow people's mind of how well we're doing there.
It's a huge disconnect, isn't it? Because what you have is in the industry where when you talk to the participants, the people, like when I go down and visit the people at Sugarleaf, right? I mean, they're so pumped up to be working,
it's
and
my favorite
they're
part of the day.
like,
I go there,
it's
I love
infectious,
it.
right? I mean, it's like, and they're excited, and they think that things are going to grow, and they've been showing that in terms of cost per gram and yield and all the things that they're doing down there, and the new customers and all the great work that is going down by the team there. But and then you come and talk to like an investor, and they're just about wanting to throw themselves off a bridge, right? And so the part that I try to focus on. So in our history of like doing companies that are involved in everything from engineered wood products to CROs and biotech to tech companies and SaaS models, and I mean literally everything. I mean it could be jelly beans, and as long as it makes money, and we're happy to be involved in it. And at the end of the day, all you have is the ability to look at what the business is doing. And that, I think, is part of what we're trying to do, even with mediums like this, and through some of the new marketing material and everything that we're bringing out, is to show people. And I think the best thing we can do to show investors is how well the business is doing, right? Because the business, I'm the first one as a marketing person that you have to do the marketing in addition to the business succeeding. It can't just be a big misnomer in the stock market is, oh, if the business is doing well, it's just the stock price is going to take care of itself. That's completely wrong. It's a joint effort just to coordinate all these things. You will get disconnect periods like right now, where no matter how well the business is doing, like Afria, I thought represented a potential TSN turning point more recently in the stock, in the emotion towards cannabis-related stocks, because they posted, I think it was like $23 million last quarter in profit, and they're on track to do $1 billion in top-line revenue next year. Like, that is a real business, right? I mean, that is, so there is no doubt about the efficacy, the legitimacy, anything of the industry and the business. We know, I mean, that was what attracted me initially to the business, was I know that people enjoy cannabis and like to use it for a variety of different reasons. But the consumers were there. It wasn't like something where you're like, well, will people, sometimes when we look at technology, we look at other things, we're like, will people even adopt it? Will they like it? Will they not? Or is it just the same as everything else?
Exactly.
So, you're like, people love cannabis, and so they should. And I'm a big advocate of it, versus alcohol and all those kind of things. So I think
and I love how all the
it.
new products that are being created now because of it. Totally different markets. Now we're marketing to grandmothers and people that normally wouldn't even do it. And what I still love is that you still have to grow the product.
Totally. So now we get back to when we were talking about what attracted. So, why did we get into why did Carl, Doug, and I, and we'll call it the money guys and the operations guys off the team, that component, the suits, right, which I never wear anymore ever since I got in the cannabis business, right? But why did the suits get involved? And yeah, there's the obvious that there's the money. But what I've always found, and this has been whether we've been involved in AI and machine learning through to engineered wood products, whatever, the only businesses that are ever successful are businesses where the founding members and the people that are working on the industry day to day have lived, breathed it, and done it their whole lives. So what impressed me is when you look at most cannabis companies, right, and we're in this bifurcation, purification process right now, where 95% of the cannabis companies are going to zero and will never be heard from again. We're at this really unique stage where that purification process is coming, and the cream rises to the top and all that kind of thing. And the guys that will do it, and it's just like technology, right? I mean, everybody has the same idea in tech. If you think you have an original idea in tech, you don't. There's 3 other guys around the world, probably 2 in the US and another one in India, all working on the same idea. The people that win is the people that execute. It's out execution of the other teams. It doesn't matter how many ride-hailing apps were there, but only a couple of them actually succeed. How many search engines? I remember in the tech days, I can't even count how many search engines that there were that were all vying, and it's only a few that rise so to those levels. So it's all about execution, right? And that is something that generally is always done better in the U.S., certainly in the tech space, and I think is also the case. No offense to a lot of our Canadian counterparts in the U.S. as to what I see of the private businesses that are being forced to operate in a much more judicious manner in the States due to the fact they haven't had as much funding. They're almost like these French, vines and grapes that have been starved, and that's what makes them such better wine. And they haven't had that access to capital. Whereas, Canada, like we've seen it with a lot of the big companies that'll be, that encompass the big 5, is the amount of money that's been thrown in. Whether they have so much money is probably an unfair battle. It's like I think the cannabis in Canada is going to be like the 5 big banks, right? You got Royal, this, that. Well, you got the same with those guys. But there was so much spillover of that capital, and then what happens is how is that managed, and then how do people execute with that? So what attracted us to Chemistree was when we looked through Nico, yourself, Sheldon, obviously, Dennis. I mean, you look and you're like, that's all that the team members had ever done, right? I mean, all you guys have ever done is done a lifetime of excellence in cannabis, right? So if you don't have that type of passion, like the people running the business and helping to advise on assets to purchase and all the different types of stuff, don't have that level of commitment and excellence, like your business will not make it. It will go. So we always talk about our team, our advantage, and it really is. I think the largest problem as a public company that we may have had at the present time is that we were not as well, our team members were not as well known in the financial sector as they were in the cannabis sector. So when we walk through MJ Biz or we're down on the floor down there, I mean, I can't even walk 5 feet without one of you guys knowing somebody and people are hugging you. And I mean, it's like, I'm like, wow. And that's what impressed us into the team that we have, was I was like, these guys are the industry, right?
Absolutely.
You know, and so, but a lot of what was getting financed and people that were getting money were people that knew finance, that finance people knew. Those are not always the best people, right? You know, that actually can run and build a cannabis operation. Because I think there's this big misnomer that somehow it's easy and it's just like kind of growing tomatoes and stuff. And we know that's about as far from the truth as possible. So if we take how important execution is, how important the people are, you know, I think we tick those boxes. What you're going to see now is the absolute, and it's very brutal. It's like a forest fire. I think I heard it described on Grizzle, and it's like these things scorch everybody to death, and then you get the green shoots that come up, which I believe Chemistree will be well positioned. And one thing I think that we took criticism for, and is a very important point to make, is that we have done this for a long time across a lot of different industries, and they may not be. They say history doesn't exactly repeat, but it sure rhymes. And it doesn't matter what business you're in from a financial perspective. If you make bad and overpay for assets, you will end up, going broke, right? So what happened is, what we've seen is a lot of the assets that have been purchased in the last few years have been purchased at multiples. So I think the S&P trades at consumer discretionary products companies, generally, in the S&P, one of the largest exchanges in the world, trade at 4.2 times, 4.3 times revenue. I think a typical company in Canada, in consumer discretionary, is maybe 3.8, 3.9 times. So let's, saw it off at 4 times, right? For a small cap company, that number is probably even less, right? Based on it doesn't have the capital and diversity of sales and across a global platform and things like that. So you look at that, and when we were trying to do deals, because we've only done a small number of deals really to this point, which in some ways is good because we still have lots of cash left, which I think is going to be very opportunistic to deploy now. But the only thing we could really find that made, robust sense was Sugarleaf, because of what we could look to acquire or be involved in that business with, right? When you've got a situation where they're getting paid 5 and 10 times revenue, or in some cases no revenue, and the valuations that they're floating, I've seen, you buy those, you will never come back from out of that, right? And it made it very difficult for the Chemistree team to try and talk to, we had a couple of major transactions that we were trying to do, but the math just doesn't make sense when you finally look at it and you go, okay, well, sure, we can pay 6 times revenue for that business and get it done. And maybe it's half in cash and half in stock, but what's going to happen is you will never come out from under the purchase of that asset, So, and if anything, it goes from being an asset to a liability, right? And it's a dual problem, because the guys that got the shares, that took stock in that transaction, now the shares are way down and they can't make money, and then the whole thing falls apart as they want to leave the quote, the marriage. So it's just bad. So what was difficult for our team, because in our Chemistree team builds these assets, right? Whether it's Sheldon doing the construction, or your team doing the cultivation, or Dennis being able to appraise the value of any component of these, we know what these things cost, right? Or more so you guys do, and then we know what type of metrics are actually employable that you can make money on. But what I think we could be competitive now, and what's going to really help the share price of Chemistree, is by getting a foundational transaction done that solidifies our footprint in California and other markets, expanding Washington to do the same level of crisp execution, yield, cost per gram, all the metrics that we use down in Washington State, in a highly competitive, mature market where it's just been absolutely, the Sugarleaf team has blown away expectations of how well they've performed. To bring that into the California marketplace, and ultimately New Jersey and up and down the East Coast, which I think is, like I said, the East Coast is definitely in inning 1 of a baseball game of where we can go. So really, that is going to be the area where if you know what the assets are realistically worth, you know, when the hubris is on and everybody's in this huge excitement about what's going on, and there's a lot of pressure from the brokers and shareholders, you got to do deals, you got to do deals, you got to do deals. You know, you can go back to the Time Warner, you know, AOL merger that just was a disaster because, of course, you know, these things happen at top of markets and they cost you way too much money. They don't make any rational sense. And the hard part is when you're trying to negotiate to do those, we're trying to acquire them. Even though we pitch, you know, hey, we've got a great team and we're actually going to make you money on your investment by partnering with us, you know, that falls on deaf ears when somebody's offering them 4 times the amount of money or cash or stock or whatever. It seems like a better deal, even though ultimately, if you gave it time to go 3-4 years down the road, it's not a better deal, you know, but people don't realize that at the time. What I think is happening now, and with the stock market being such a forward-leading instrument, it is already priced in this massive you know, correctional period, transitional phase, scorched earth, whatever you want to call it, into the cannabis business. And now what we're finding is the business cycle is starting to catch up. So you're seeing big bifurcation in the operators that are able to operate properly, that do understand the importance of yield, getting the cost per gram, being the lowest cost, you know, in the lowest percentile of producer, and the marginal to awful operations, of which there is plenty when we look, because there's not that many people know how to produce cannabis at scale the way that our team does. When you look at that, they're all starting to see stocks go down really quickly because it's just very easy for the hemorrhaging to happen, and it's fear, and you know. But operations is, you know, anybody who's run a business knows they don't go broke the same way that a stock chart breaks down. So it's a very forward-leading instrument to what happens. But now
what I think is interesting, if I actually drew out the Chemistree stock in the last 6 months, and then I did a chart of our products, our brand, what the sales have been.
They're completely divergent.
Absolutely opposite.
And that, my friend, is exactly what you look for. That is how you make money in the stock market, right? Because you need to spot, while everybody else, like they always say, like, you know, be a contrarian. If you're not a contrarian, you're a victim, is like something that used to get said all the time in the market. And so, like Warren Buffett, all these guys, I can sit here all day and spout off what other people say that are a lot smarter and richer than me, but it's, they buy low, sell high for a reason, right? You know, and you have to wait your time. Like Buffett always says, you know, you have to wait till the tide goes out to see who's swimming without their swim trunks on, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing now in the cannabis industry. If we get right down to it, you know, what's happening is operators are starting to get in jams. And operators are starting to go bankrupt, and operators are starting to get, you know, in real pinches, and that means that they need partners and they need capital, and they're open to talking about the types of things that I think that the Chemistree team can bring to them. And I can tell just by the sheer volume of transactions that have even come to us. I mean, it was crickets, you know, 6 months ago, other than maybe a couple transactions we're working on, and now I'm seeing a steady flow of deal flow is coming in every week, of people looking to solve problems for them effectively, right? So, I mean, nobody is better equipped than the Chemistree team to deal with whatever issue you may have in the cannabis business, whether it's branding, whether it's marketing, whether it's cultivation. You know, when we go back to like what most attracted us to the industry and the team is, though, and you know, we have talked about it at length, and it's being personified in real life time at Sugarleaf in Washington State, with the incredible growth that the brand has experienced and sales and adoption by customers, but is cultivation. Like, you know, it's funny, everything, people dismissed cultivation for, you know, and I mean, I remember walking around Toronto, and when we were there on doing our larger debenture raise, and you know, and people, you know, were, oh, well, you don't even need cultivation. You just buy cannabis from somebody else. And like, I thought about it. I was like, well, but if everybody's thinking they're going to buy cannabis from somebody else, where's the cannabis coming from?
Well, I just came back from Hall of Flowers
Right.
in Northern California, and they had 20,000 brands, and they only have 8,000 producers.
So
Washington State right now there's a shortage.
yeah,
And that's, I think, because the bad operators are, you know,
they're
being sifted out.
Totally.
And then in California, they're still young. They're not there yet. Just like how we're going to be building a facility, there's lots of other people that are going to be building a facility, and people aren't there yet. They're not quite there to meet the demand.
Totally.
And but it's a good time to be an operator. The people are making money. They're doing well.
Yes, and so this is the other. If we get into the macro on like the United States, is the assets. You know, I remember a broker was talking to Sheldon one time in a meeting. He said, "Well, nobody can make money at this kind of stuff." Sheldon said, lots of people are making money. You just don't hear about them because they're not public companies. They're private guys working. Like, I mean, look at Dennis is making money. I mean, there's guys in California making money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's very highly effective operators. They're just guys that you don't hear about because they're not public companies yet. But they're all going to be guys that are going to be coming public into this next wave when money's allowed to flow properly, once the Safe Bank Act or a version of the Safe Bank is passed and legalization happens. I mean, if we think that legalization,
they just don't need, to be honest with you, they're doing just fine. They can do it. They're funding it privately, and they're okay with the size of their farm. I just came back from a farm in Humboldt. He just doubled the size of his grow, and honestly, he's very content.
Yeah, these guys until they face the pressure of maybe other guys trying to get in on the action that they're and the market share that they have by big public companies coming in, and I'm not saying even Canadian public, I'm not talking like other U.S. guys, as it's legal. When that money flows in and they're able to come in, then that might force them to have to change their strategy a little bit, because right now they're kind of everybody's kind of fighting with a garbage can lid, right? There's nobody's really got that big bag of money to come in. What we saw dominant in Canada was all of a sudden, the Canopies and the Afrias and the Auroras could come in with like amounts of money that were just like daunting. And I mean, listen, they made some pretty questionable asset purchases themselves, and whereas the private operators, like, they have to be very judicious with how they're going to steward that capital, right? Because everything means something to the bottom line. It's not like, we'll just go to the market and get more money, right? So something we're very mindful of is like, how many shares do we have out? What is our cost of capital, right? How much are we raising dilution? These are all major factors. Like, if people are looking at the share price, like I would say where I feel Chemistree has a very strategic advantage is we have a team that is excellent across all facets and disciplines within the cannabis industry and the financial industry. I mean, my team and myself have done hostile takeover, has been taken out. We've done every type of corporate transaction there is. We've raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars through every different kind of business you can possibly imagine over the last 15 years. So completed every different type of transaction. So we have that experience. We carry that. When it's married up with a team of guys that really knows what they're doing on the execution side, world's your oyster. But and you don't see that very much. You don't see that synergy and that symbiotic relationship really that much particularly in a lot of the smaller cannabis companies. So what you do see a lot of is lots of shares out, lots of debt, not a profitable operation. So like, if we look at something like Sugar Leaf that is on a much smaller footprint, but it's almost like having a private company, right? I mean, it's like when you own Chemistree right now, it's a very small group of friends and family, and so the stock won't trade as much, until you get more of this institutional involvement and things like that. It's going to be a less,
which we're working on, right?
Exactly. Like the biggest thing that has been the barrier has been the federal illegality in the States and doing cross-border transactions and stuff. It's been easy for guys to just keep doing stuff in Canada. And the thing about investment bankers and guys in Canada is they will just keep doing transaction after transaction after transaction after transaction that pays them until it doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's the epitome of like, there isn't a lot of foresight into, hey, where's the market going to be in 2 or 3 years? Now, us as like entrepreneurs and people that build businesses, like, the last successful business that we exited, it was 7 years from the time that we started it till the time that we finished it. We're ultimately taken out in a hostile takeover. Like 7 years. Like, so when we look at stuff, we don't look at it for like, what's it going to be over the next few months, or like, that's how I get remunerated. Like, I don't get remunerated just because we banked 14 deals this month, right? I get remunerated because we build a successful business and hopefully are able to build, some version of Budweiser, to use the alcohol analogy that we've talked about, 3 years from now. So where I look is that the U.S. offers so much excitement as to what can be built and acquired, and it's all actually the fun part is it's being funded and built right now at a much higher level and already purifying itself within the private and VC world within the United States, as opposed to Canada, where it was just like game on, money just came in and everybody just kind of built it, and and it was just almost a free for all. It's actually much. You have such a better ability to pick through the litter, if you want to call it that, in the States. And here's the other one, I mean, I could go on forever about how much I love the team and how good the team is. And people will just have to see that. They will see it in the execution of Sugarleaf, of the Sugarleaf brand, and how profitable the operation is, and what they've been able to do. But where I think you're also going to see it is the fact that we have ability to one of probably less than 20 applicants into New Jersey. So people not even focused on it. They're not even aware. But through having like Nico and his contacts, we have an application in for a vertically integrated license, in New Jersey. That whole Eastern Seaboard is going to be so exciting. I mean, that is the mainstream where the United States. I think they've always looked at cannabis. Like when I talk to guys in the States, and particularly people a bit older, they said, it's always been known that cannabis has kind of been liked by the West Coast. They look at like, that's the hippies over there, the Oregons, the Washingtons, the Californians.
They ship it all to New York. Come
It's
on.
all over there, but they're like, that's what the hippies do over in that side, right? But it's not. That's not an East Coast thing. We don't do that. And now, they're starting to adopt it, right? I mean, you're seeing it in Chicago, you're seeing it in Illinois, you're seeing it in Michigan. So it's gone to the Midwest, it's going to the East Coast. You're having it come to the forefront in 2020 for a call to rec legal. In New Jersey, New York, I'm sure will be not too far to follow. Florida, right, in 2020. So, besides that they maybe have it medical or not, but the full rec, right, is starting in a lot of these places that you would have never thought, like New York, New Jersey. That means, that says to me that the adoption is truly starting in the financial powerhouse base of America, which is ultimately literally the world, right? So that adoption is now complete. And the acceptance now just has to come over into actual legislation, things like that. But that's also what's so cool about the United States, is they do things at this much more methodical but well-planned way that allows you to build the business better. It allows the customers to adopt the products better. They don't just run like kind of the situation we had in Canada, where it's just like, okay, everybody's got a license and go out and figure it out, and okay, the packaging, and we don't really have those rules yet, and oh, now it's legal, but nobody can even find the products because there's no stores open, and they're all like, that's just not the States. I mean, they just don't do stuff like that. That was the whole precursor to why we just even avoided Canada, and sure, we maybe didn't make any money as all the Canadian stocks. I mean, the only investment I have in anything to do with cannabis is Chemistree, because that's the way I do it. We eat our own cooking, we put our own money in, we pick 5 or 6 things that we work on, maybe over a 2-3 year period,
the only thing I'm invested
and that's it. Yeah. No, and it's funny how, but Jeff Bezos probably doesn't have a lot of whole other investments other than Amazon, right? Like, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg's out investing in, other than maybe other startup technologies that maybe Facebook is interested in. Those guys, they build their business. Like, that's how you make money, right? Like, and you have to get very, very singular into it. These shotgun approaches of investing across 20 different things. Like, ask people right now how that's working out in the cannabis business, right? You need to identify the best in class, best in breed, all that kind of thing. So I think it starts with the operational team.
Yeah. And I'm very confident of that. I know who they are.
I would put the operational risk of the Chemistree team at literally about as little as you could, as if you could.
I'm beyond confident of that.
So,
I don't understand the stock market stuff, and that's why we meet all the time, and you school me on it. But honestly, that part I'm not worried about.
If you have the good operational time, as they say, every dog has his day, or even a blind squirrel finds a nut. Once in a while. Eventually, the market will time up, and it will help find you, particularly if you can market. And I think, between the marketing that you know how to do, the marketing that I know how to do, and that the team knows how to do, we will be there.
I just think we need to get California obviously up and running, which we're doing that.
A foundational transaction in California is key, and a foundational transaction in the East Coast. I think our team's philosophy is, a lot of management teams are quite happy to go and sing from the rooftops about all the incredible and wonderful things they're going to do, and then there's no execution. Like, if we're going to challenge the team on operations to executional excellence, we have to match that in the capital markets, right? With that. So I know Carl and myself, like, there's no point in trying to falsely get people excited if there's nothing to be excited about, right? I mean, I think what I know that I think is the most important, and I think this is key and speaks directly to the team and how we work symbiotically together. When I look at the majority of cannabis deals that come through, and we see a lot of stuff because we're in the business of financing things, and when people want money, you tend to see everybody because everybody always wants money. So we come through, and what I notice is these things are shopped around. So let's say some guy in California has something, and by the time it's gotten up to some investment banker or somebody up here in Canada, it's already generally way late gone. Hundreds of people have looked at it. You know what I mean? There's no exclusivity to it. The difference that I notice in working hand in glove with the foundational members of the Chemistree team is those deals, they're friends. It's like family. Like for you guys, it's like that guy doesn't call an investment banking group or some VC or anybody. The first call goes to, or it's not even a call. They might even be like talking with you guys over coffee or something like that, and somebody says,
'cause we're there.
"Hey," there's like family, like Sheldon described. He's like, it's like a guy calls him and says, "Hey, bud," or you're taking an order for lights, or you're doing something that like causes that guy to then. So you're the first guy in the deal chain, right? And to me, if you want the best quality assets, the best in class assets, and that's what I think we're pursuing with Chemistree. Like you're always looking for it may look like an Oldsmobile, but I know it's a Ferrari. So first of all, you have to have the expertise of actually understanding, it may look like an Oldsmobile, but is it actually a Ferrari? And then you have to have the ability to make it into a Ferrari, right? Through that, and understand that, and the value proposition and all that. And I think that's where I look at, we are not getting deals. The deals that we're going to do in Chemistree are not deals that are shopped around and kicked between 15 different people. We have to settle for, we got this. We are going straight to the source because of the relationships that you guys have that deal direct with the growers, cultivators, whatever they are in the industry, and out of trust, because we are the suits, and going to the suits, like that's, it's like that's, you're not going to get the quality. The fillet pieces of these transactions are coming direct, because they're going to say, if I'm going to take stock in a company and I'm going to do shares and I'm going to be involved with somebody, I need to know that it's going to get operated properly, right? I need to know. So by virtue of, our competency is quite simple. And as far as on the financial side, we can bring the money, we can bring this, we can bring that. We have a great public company with good shares, a very low share count, all these kind of things that I think a cultivator, if he owned a big facility or whatever, would find us attractive at this time. And we've got cash, because we've been judicious with it. But you have the operational expertise then to that they will know, okay, good, we can take that assistance help, whether they need it or not, and they know that you're going to be a value add partner. But like I say, I can't stress that enough. When you do tech, when you do anything else, if you're the fifth guy in seeing a deal, it's not a deal. Because why did the other four guys pass up on it? Do you know what I mean? Whereas when we look at deals that are truly of interest to us, that we try to drive down, but they're generally clients of your guys or somebody, like it's a friend or literally somebody you would almost deem as family. So we're getting stuff direct from the source, which is the way you're going to get the quality filet deals, right?
One of the things we did this time for the investor update that was different is we actually asked the people that were, I think it was on an email list, and also the people on our Facebook if they had any questions for you. So I got them on my laptop, if you don't mind.
Sure. I encourage people to go to grizzle.com and Green Entrepreneur and MJ Biz, and they'll get a bit of more independent analysis that will kind of back up, I think, a lot of what it is that I'm talking about, right? Like don't go to your local broker or dealer for investment, and analysis like, that. I mean, I think those type of platforms, are very impartial. They're, here's the lay of the land, the industry. And I think that's important. Like there's, we talk about it all the time. In whatever sector you're in, if the macro is against you, meaning the broader sector or trend is against you in that sector, right? It doesn't matter how good your company is, you're going to get caught. The old analogy was Dennis Gartman. He used to talk. He said, even when they come to raid the house of ill repute, even the good girls and the piano player go to jail till they get it all figured out. And it's true, because everybody gets put in the penalty box. And then what happens is when these purification processes happen, only certain people come out of the penalty box, right? Depending upon your capital structure, your cash. So you look at something like, and your operations, right? And your ability to execute, right? So if you look, what have we got? At 20 cents, maybe we've got a $7.5 million market capitalization, $7 million market capitalization. Well, we have $6 million in the bank, and we have a profitable operation through our operator in Washington State in Sugarleaf. We have a global brand in Sugarleaf, and now the ability to start taking that into California and beyond.
We're going to build it out to be a national brand. That was always the plan. And that's what we're going to do.
And now you can get East Coast, West Coast. I mean, so to me, that is one of the most, I really challenge people to find a more compelling value proposition than $6 million in cash with a profitable operation already and global brand, and with only 37 million shares out at this price, right? I really believe in that, and most of the metrics. So if you put these type of metrics, like traditional metrics, let's even just say 4 times, which is probably on the high side. 3 is probably good, but you look at even like, and obviously due to the nature of the relationship with in Washington State, with them being an operator, us just being a supporting cast member, you can't directly put the revenue numbers onto your books. But if you look at it like, Sugarleaf,
Every gram that's being sold isn't our branded product.
That is what you're growing. And when you look at unit economics and technology and the future value of a customer and things like that, that is the race right now, right? Is you have to be acquiring customers. But as we said, everything starts with the plant. Everything starts with your ability to cultivate and have maximum yield, lowest cost per gram. And then by virtue, I think it's been numerous times people have said, Sugarleaf product is probably the best value for the price point for the flower,
I think by far,
that there is, period, right? I mean, and that's why
that
it's selling.
was always the goal.
It's gone from what 30,000 in US in a month in sales to as much as 170,000 a month in US. I mean, that's in a year. I mean, that when you're a financial guy and you see that type of growth in a brand and in a highly competitive market like Washington State, which I think it was, you're going to talk about in your video, but when you showed me some of the metrics to, only 200 of 1,500 licenses, there's only 200 licenses that are even doing 100,000 in sales in Washington State. So,
absolutely.
So you've got a highly mature,
and half
difficult
are doing
market.
0.
Yeah.
They're not even selling a gram.
So you've got this where all that's happening is, and this speaks directly to what I'm talking about the purification process, whether it's to the business, whether it's to the brand, or whether it's to public companies. Take that same, you probably had 1,500 public companies, and you're now going to take that number down to 200 that even matter, and you're going to get down to 100 that are really, the guys that are the guys, right? So that's what we're faced with. So we're just in that part of the cycle, right?
So this guy, Dennis, asked a question. He says, like, what's happening with cannabis stocks? And he's taken some losses. And I think you kind of talked about this, but this was inevitable, I guess.
So, and to Dennis, I would say, like, yeah, I mean, we're not allowed to give any kind of direct financial advice or anything like that, just as a disclaimer. But I mean, it's obvious what's happened, right? We've had a massive, literally an orgy of people driving into cannabis stocks. People buy anything. It was like the tech days. I mean, our favorite example was a company called Box.com, which apparently was like going to send boxes to your house that you could box up, and that was somehow had a $300 million valuation, right? Which subsequently went to zero. So you've got a lot of that type of hubris going. You've got a lot of, and the problem is that what generally happens is people get fixated on the stock price and not what the business operations are doing. So traditionally, how digital marketing works and a lot of these different kinds of things work is people will look at the stock price, and if they see the stock price moving up, that is what they use as the confirmation of to how well the business is doing or how the quality of the investment. And the higher the price is, the better it must be. That's often not the case. If you stick to the revenue metrics, right, and you say, like, okay, let's say Sugarleaf is on track, like with the expansion, to do 4.5 million US in sales, right? Well, take that 3 times, multiple $15 million market cap attributable, right? So it tells you kind of the value you can run some of this kind of stuff. So you have to run stuff to what companies are doing. You may have to take a bit of a leap in 1 year. Like most of the analysts are looking a year out because it's such a developing and new industry. So 1 year looking forward maybe of what their revenue is going to be to get some basis. But the share price is not the barometer that really ultimately defines what's going to happen. It's a very imprecise short-term instrument, and it's often what sucks a lot of people in is they see the stock doing really well, so then they think, I got to be on that and I got to buy it today. And one thing I found with real businesses, like whether it's engineered wood products, whether it's fiber optic cable deployment, whatever it is, with revenue-based business, there's always that lag time between when earnings are posted to what the company's actually doing, that kind of stuff. So you're more important to stay versed with what the corporate developments are and track the operational success of the business, right?
Okay, so then we've got Vic. He's disappointed, obviously, in the performance. Hey, so am I. I'm a shareholder.
Totally. So am I. I'm
exactly. a shareholder. And he actually says, he's like, we were told these stocks are a scam, and I can almost answer that and say, I'm there at the operation. I'm working hard to make this brand the brand. I mean, I didn't join a publicly traded company. We could have done this amongst friends. We did this to do something special, something big. We want to build this into a national brand. I don't think we're going anywhere anytime soon. And
not with the bank balance and the level of connections that our team has. And this period where we didn't get transactions done has actually proved to be really beneficial, because now we're sitting there with a great cash position and the ability to look and have people attracted to our team. And I think that's what's going to change. The Chemistree operational team is suddenly going to be embraced by the investment guys that didn't used to know them. Right, so the investment guys sort of would focus on other investment guys and people they're familiar with, and this guy grew some, this guy. I mean, I had guys like this guy who used to grow weed in high school. Well, that doesn't matter for anything. Like you got guys like the guys in Chemistree who've been growing enormous operations in the desert long before anybody was doing any of this type of stuff they're talking about up here, right?
And even if you're a great cultivator, even if you're got 200 lights and you're amazing, the problem is there's so many aspects of the business, and that's the guys that I'm seeing that are doing well. That I, even privately. The one guy's this great grower, the other guy's this accountant, and they have this wonderful partnership, or somebody's really good at marketing. And that's the thing, you have to have a full team. That's the difference. When I see people coming in that came in from the black market and didn't have the transition and didn't understand that it's more than just growing a nice product and having a connection. It's the full team.
Once you start having to pay for electricity,
yeah, exactly.
All the different costing. Hey, I don't just throw my product in a bag. It now has to go in a jar with a label,
and understand packaging.
I have to clear it through an actual federal agency or a state agency or whatever. Like these costs kind of impinge on your margins, right? So it's not the cash cow that it was in the black market.
Do you want to wake up and actually make sure that everybody's clocking in at 8? And manage these people?
This is like so you're going to take a lot of margin compression in order for that to happen. But I mean, I want to directly answer that gentleman's question, because in the case of Chemistree, yeah, absolutely, this is the farthest thing from a scam. I mean, how will we demonstrate that to people? By execution, okay, and by operations, and that's why we try to do formats like this. The Chemistree video, we have a nice case study coming out about it that I think will demonstrate all that with the only thing that does matter, which is math, right?
Which actually leads into this next question.
But I don't disagree. Like most of these things are scams, okay? Like most of them, and even the ones that are not scams, it's kind of like I wanted to be a pro tennis player, but I got to being like third or fourth in Canada, but I was third and fourth in Canada, and then you go into the world and you realize now I'm 500 in the world. You're like, but when I was little, I thought I was the best in the world, okay? But you realize that the world is a big place, and like so.
Oh yeah,
my point is only certain guys are going to make it.
There's no guarantee we're going to win this race, but the point is we're going
to finish with a medal. I promise you that.
We're in it, and I'm not giving up. And okay. So another question was, which actually leads into what you were just saying, was when do you start to see profitability from your company? What makes you different than other cannabis companies that are all losing share value? And that's from Michelle and David Miller.
Yeah, no, I think where I see us being different is because we actually have cult of personality, career people that were the actual innovators of a lot of the technologies and a lot of the things that you see in operation and adopted into the industry now, whether by Sheldon, Nico, yourself, Dennis. They are the actual trailblazers that pioneered this entire industry. I don't know a bigger pioneer in the California industry than Dennis. There's not even close. I have seen what has transpired at Sugarleaf. I have watched and been to multiple facilities that Sheldon has built. And I mean, nobody builds these greenhouses and operations better. I mean, the KPIs, the procedures, all that type of stuff can only be learned through the actual execution of it, right? Like, and actually having done it. You can't just like write this stuff on a piece of paper and hope that somehow some guy's gonna be able to do it at an operation in Arizona, right? Or wherever else he is in the world. Like these are extremely complex operations that, require years and years of experience, and you can't buy that. And that's the thing I've noticed with a lot of the teams that, and you sort of talked about it already, which is the people like yourself, Sheldon, the Dennises, the Nicos, they can choose to work with whoever they want or just do it all themselves. So they don't even have to have the fact that they will work with us and work with Chemistree is a huge boon to like what it is we're trying to build. Right? Mm-hmm. Because they can go off and take their skills. They're transferable anywhere. People pay them lots of money for consulting and for all that other kind of stuff. Yep. So the fact that they choose to hang their hat here and help us build that, I think, is what will allow us on all those different other disciplines and the execution, all the rest to succeed, right?
And, sorry to cut you off, but do you think that you see profitability anytime soon, or do you think that any money, like for instance, even we'll get California up and going, well, we have the whole nation that's coming on board. We have to start building. I mean, this is going to require a lot of money. Are we technically going to start seeing any money? I mean,
Totally. No, I think, I mean, these are great questions, and I'll preface it this way. I mean, I think what you're going to have is a lot of scenarios where you're going to have profitable operations and operational components of the different business. I think it's actually kind of a mistake to get too focused on profitability. Like, I mean, Sugarleaf Washington is already profitable, right? Okay, so but if you're only going to shoot out a certain amount of cash, that is only going to help you so much. What Amazon, kind of the guy that did it the best was Bezos with Amazon, because he said, I'm never going to be profitable. I'm just going to keep taking market share and market share and market share and market share. And now Amazon just says, hey, I'm going into this industry, and that entire industry, I mean, if they announce tomorrow they're going to the auto industry, their auto industry will go down 18% just on the announcement. So that's the ultimate of it. But my point is that this early on and like I said, we use that analogy. I still think we're in the first two innings of a ball game in the United States. If you focus too hard on profitability, you're not going to actually grow your brand enough and grow your presence and all, as a public company. The reason for being a public company is to absorb in a roll-up type strategy through diversified assets or complementary assets through different states throughout, in our case, the United States, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we're the largest thing to point to that. So I think that you have to have a goal with, like, okay, within the next couple of years, we want the public company as an entity to for sure be profitable. But in the short term, you want to see all these operations you buy. Like, let's say we buy a foundational asset in California, then you want to see that is either already profitable or within a year you've turned it into profitability. Kind of like the Sugarleaf analogy, where you're buying that automobile that you turn into a Ferrari. It's doing that. That's what I think is to focus on each individual, and of course we'll keep people well apprised of how we're doing that. But I think that's the most important to that kind of time. I think if you try too hard to get into the profitability component, you're going to get in a situation where you don't expand the brand enough, and that's what differentiates. Funny, what differentiates U.S. technology versus Canadian. Canadians are obsessed in technology about getting their technology, and I interviewed somebody recently. He's had a number of big exits and a couple $1 billion businesses. He said, the States, like, these guys get it. They build these businesses. They spend equivalent amounts of money on marketing and brand and customers with sometimes an inferior product. And there's a really cool website I was looking at that was like, it showed you like Airbnb and other any company's website, and you could track it back like to the first website I'd ever had all the way through to like where it is today. And you look at like Amazon's first website, or you look at Airbnb's first website compared to what it looks like today, you're like, or Uber's, it's like
a time machine.
Time warp, right? So you're like, holy cow. But my point in that is that US guys inherently get this in tech. They do unit economics. They go out, they get their customers, right? And they bring those customers in. And if the product is maybe, they want 10 out of 10 for customer penetration and satisfaction. And if the product's only an 8, they're okay with that if those other things are okay. What Canadians seem to be very, very focused on always is like, I got to have a perfect product. Well, you're never going to have a perfect product. You know what I mean? Like, there's always things you can improve on the product. Like, I get it. But there'll be a 10 out of 10 on the product. But then they have no money and no sales pipeline, no unit economics developed of customers using it. And then it's just a great product that somebody's going to take from you. So everything is won and lost at the battlefront with the customer. And particularly something that's going to be as competitive as cannabis, like 20,000 brands and Hall of Flowers, only 8,000 customers. The most important thing
8,000 producers that are supplying these 20,000 brands.
So that tells you that rubber's going to meet the road in there in a massive way.
They'll go through the same thing. They're only 1 year in. We're in Washington now 5 years in. 2014 was when it technically started. So it's going to be the same thing.
Let's talk about something that also I think is really important. Where do we see profitability for Chemistree? Where do we see an advantage of Chemistree and the team? You go into the California marketplace. You're down there with your new Canadian public company, and you want to get on shelves, and you want to get your product on shelves down in California to California retailers, or through a distributor. I call it the Mexican blanket, type idea, and that's without being offensive to anybody. It's just like, you go down, and when I try to buy a blanket on the beach in Mexico, I get one price, and the locals get another price, right? That's just what happens. And if I'm a good negotiator, I maybe get a slightly better price, but ultimately I'm not getting the local price. Well, the advantage when we have into going to penetrate these different marketplaces like California, whether it's Northern California, Southern California, is due to the relationships that the team has, we're not going to pay those prices. And I think that's what's really hurting a lot of Canadians companies
Well, we've always told you
on the
that our
profitability
cost
price.
of goods is
It
way
is
lower than anybody else
totally,
because
totally.
our
It's
founding
20
members are,
20 plus years of relationship that is allowing.
and they're the manufacturers of a lot of these
So
products.
in a nutshell, that is the value proposition of Chemistree, is that you as somebody investing in these business in the chemistry company is going to get the benefits of all of that type of legacy of people like the pioneers, like the Dennises, the Sheldons, yourself, that are the Nicos, that have done all this work to get them that preferred pricing. It's like when somebody comes to see me in the capital markets, if I have had lots of experience in business with them and dealings over years, of course you're going to do more and get better pricing for them than somebody you just met or whatever. So, I think that's not to be underestimated of the value of that. So you really get that as somebody who's a participant and a shareholder with us, is you kind of get to kind of tag on for the ride for that, where it's like, okay, I get in that, and that's going to attribute a lot to our profitability. I can only speak so much for other people, but I've seen in my discussions with brokers the amount of money that's getting lost because these guys are trying to buy shelf space. And I understand, unit economics very well of how they're trying to make all that work, but they literally, with the prices they're paying and the agreements they're signing for the amount of product that they have to buy every month and get on shelf, and then half of it's going bad because they can't move it, because they're running out of money and they can't market properly. They don't have the relationships, the face-to-face, like from Washington. Like Washington is like you going down and meeting people in a van and taking them out on. It's a person-to-person business, right? It's
Absolutely.
not just like, hey, you can buy this through the internet, because oh yeah, you can't. It's not, especially in the States, right? I mean, it is still two people have to sit down and work out a deal or talk or be talking to the product. It's all relationship based, and as much as we get into this technology world where that stuff isn't, when you get to the core of it, and you're doing that, it's not. And cultivation is the ultimate extent of that, right? I mean, cultivation is. So I think there's this big, and this is another really important point, is that everybody's talking vertical integration. Probably for investors, they hear all about this vertical integration. That is not how you make money in the cannabis business. I've been in the consumer products business in Coca-Cola. Okay, even Coca-Cola, even McDonald's are not fully vertically integrated. It is impossible. You cannot do absolutely everything, right? Like somebody still has to grow the sugar cane for Coca-Cola. They don't grow their own sugar cane. Okay, they focus on their areas of expertise along the value chain. It might be 90% of it, but nobody is 100% in the consumer products business can be 100% fully vertically integrated, whether it's tobacco, soft drinks, whatever it is, right?
I heard one of the richest guys in America was the guy that
J.R. Simplot
made the foam.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say the
foam.
potato guy, for fries for McDonald's, right?
No, he made the foam container for the Big Macs.
Oh yeah. No, each one literally. So J.R. Simplot was the guy behind the French fries, the potatoes for the fries McDonald's. Each one, probably every single person that has ever provided a staple product for McDonald's has become like their family's family will never have to work again, right? Like it's amazing what those industries do. But my point is, whether you're McDonald's, Coca-Cola, you leave the people that are the experts to do that business. So where I'm driving with that is that our primary core expertise is in starting right at the plant with cultivation, manufacturing, and branding, which I think are the most important things along the value chain. But it's way less important for us to be involved at the dispensary level when we have the connections we have, because the thing that gets you on the shelf is the customers, is the great product at a great price. So I think that if I was, advising investors or anything like that, is like look for the guys that are deciding to find their niche and hone that niche out. Because as this industry evolves 2-3 years down from now, that's what's going to separate people, right? If chemistry is, and it goes back to that, everybody's just going to buy their weed to package it. Well, then you're going to have to buy from Chemistree, or you're going to have to buy from the guys that are cultivating it well, that get maximum yield at the lowest cost per gram, because those are the guys going to be left standing.
Yeah, we should sit down again and just talk about just the Sugar Leaf brand and where we're going to go with that, and because
Totally.
there's a lot of cool things happening. So let me
Totally.
go.
Yeah.
We got Joy. She's wanted to know what the state of the cannabis investment landscape. I think we more than covered that.
We've almost beaten it to death.
Yeah, we've beaten it to death. Current and future plans for Chemistree. We talked about Nico. We talked about what's going on down in Southern California. The success we're having with the Sugar Leaf brand. Canada versus U.S. potential. Why we focus on the USA. We definitely talked about that, and let's see what else we got. I like this guy, VJ. He just said dream on. I don't know. Yeah, this guy, same thing. Do you foresee a turnaround? We talked about that. That was Dr. Kimberly. And do you see a comeback in the foreseeable future? That's what she ended with, which I think, if you want to talk about, I think you
Well,
agree that it's just this transition, and you think that the U.S. I don't know if you I think you hammered this point down, but when the U.S. truly opens up their banking,
and you can flow money from all around the world. What you've seen in Canada is about as small a scratch of the surface of what you could possibly see. I mean, it's like comparing the CSE versus the Dow. I mean, like the flood of money that can come in from around the world. Like, who do you think is funding all these major tech operations and stuff like that? When you start having international capital, and that was what's so interesting. You know, when you watch like Tilray, which I think was the, you know, leave all the valuations, all the craziness aside, because they got Peter Thiel and they got all kinds of stuff. All that was the first company to list into the NASDAQ, and the stock went crazy. All that was a massive outpouring that, to me as an investor and a company builder, showed the massive expression of desire of people to own a cannabis company. Do you know what I mean? That industry is real, people want to own it. So that was the first chance that a guy from, you know, pick it up from Indonesia or from Saudi Arabia or from London could buy that company, because you could buy it on the NASDAQ, right? It was Canadian operations, it was legal. Went from, you know, $25 to, you know, to $300 in like 3 days or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. But that showed you that desire is there. So then that's all been bottled up, right? All that's now been bottled up and pushed down, and it's doom and gloom and everything's, and honestly, that's when you want to buy stocks, right? So, you know, it's like my diamond analogy is all this money in the Canadian diamonds, all this money went to finding diamonds, because there was a rumor that there was going to be diamonds. BHP is in Canada looking for diamonds. De Beers is in Canada looking for diamonds. So all this money just goes piling into finding diamonds. That's what's happened. Everybody piled those money into cannabis, right? And what happens from that money? A select few and a bunch of very savvy people that were the diehards, like Chuck Fipke was the first guy to find diamonds and niferous kimberlites in Canada, and you know, fathered the entire Canadian diamond industry. Was like that kind of cult of personality, right? The guy that was like, you know, they said he was out in a K-Way jacket, you know, and flip-flops when everybody else was covered up in like all kinds of parkas and stuff in the winter, because he was just that passionate about being the first guy to find diamonds, because it's what he wanted to do, right? And so you get that same type of thing of the type of members that are in our team, and that's what they want to do. They were doing this type of stuff before, you know, anybody was throwing money at that. So what happens is you get that expression of all that money kind of going almost into a big funnel, and then out comes the ones that actually make some sunshine out of it, which is the guys. So sure enough, the diamond stocks went from crazy valuations all the way down to almost, well, 95% of them went to zero, and then those 5 or 10% that were the true operators that had legitimate operations, were going into production, went from like trading at 1 time trailing revenue to like, you know, 20 times trailing, and went back from, so I think they, like, if you look at some of the Dimet and some of these things, they went from like, you know, $70 all the way back down into the low dollars, like $1.50 or $2.50 or something like that. And then as they got permitted to go through and build their, you know, they went, I can't remember split adjusted what they went to, but it was literally into the hundreds of dollars, right? So the interesting thing for an investor is you actually, if you're already invested, yeah, it's tough, right? You have 2 choices: hang on, or you know, as we said, don't frown, average down, right? And buy more, or rationalize your portfolio, get rid of the losers, buy the ones you think are going to make it. But for newer investors, which we are looking at this as from Canadians as the people that have invested. So knowing the illegality that has plagued the U.S. market, most people can't even invest in it or haven't. I talked to guys in Europe, I talked to U.S. stockbrokers, they're rubbing their hands. They're like, we're going to be able to buy our own, which is being U.S. operators that we're familiar with, and jurisdictions we're familiar with rules that we're familiar with very soon, within the next, you know, 12 months probably, when money will flow. All that money is going to come pouring in to those type of U.S. operators, and the purification's already been done for them. There's going to be less choice, right? Because they will have already weeded the weak ones out. They'll have already gone. So it's actually an exciting time to be an investor. So they're rubbing their hands like, oh, this purification process is going to allow us to sort of, the Darwinism is going to rise to the top. We're going to get our great companies that we can now buy. They'll be the ones that will be the initial into the U.S. Will be the ones that had the kind of explosive Canopy, Aurora style, you know, Organigram, T-God kind of runs the next, and then probably it'll go way too far again, you know, down the road. That'll happen where the U.S. everybody and their dog will be trying to list a U.S. cannabis company, and the pendulum will go all the way, and we'll start all over again. But our job is to position now to be a part of that next big evolution, which I think is coming for the cannabis business. Because as much as stuff is exciting around the world, as much as the only market that matters is the United States market. And that's why we always focused on it. It is the dominant market around the world. The U.S. consumer, bar none, is the one you want, right?
So I have a question from Ed. He was saying, how seriously are large companies like Coca-Cola taking the edible and infused drink opportunities that exist in the marijuana business?
So my experience, having been at Coca-Cola myself, is Coca-Cola will be probably one of the last entrants into the space. That will be, just as a little, that will be your top of the market signal when Coca-Cola decides to buy a brand in cannabis. It's over, right? I mean, you should be exiting as much of your stuff as possible. And that's not that means that Coca-Cola isn't smart. It's just that Coca-Cola has a vision of 20, 100 years. Like when they bought Monster Energy, people said, you guys are overpaying like crazy. This doesn't make any sense. This is like, how is that looking now? It's looking absolutely fantastic. Their time horizon of what they're operating on, and then what they can then grow the sales of that brand with their pipeline and sales distribution and customer base and things globally is like nothing you've ever seen. So, they would rather pay, they are the epitome of pay more to see more, right? So what I do know is absolutely, they know that the next big evolution will be like, they're there all the time, whether it was energy drinks, whether it's plant-based milks, where there's different plant-based food, protein milks. And so, I mean, you look at it used to be rice, maybe you had rice milk, then now you've got it into almond,
I had almond
soy, and there's new ones all the time, right? That, I mean, it went from, being, it's like the energy drink market, right? I mean, you went into a cooler and there was like a couple little shelves of it. Now they're in 3-4 coolers deep of just energy drinks or just milk-based, protein drinks and stuff like that.
And by the way, on that note of the infused drink, Dennis, one of the founding members, he's actually, I think it was maybe 6-7 months ago, actually put in a bottling line, and he's doing the Lagunitas Hi-Fi hops, and I think they're very happy with that's going on, and that's tied to. I think it's Heineken owns.
Is Lagunitas, yeah,
Lagunitas
correct.
or something.
Yeah.
So it's
they're there.
There's some big players that are looking at it.
They're paying attention. They are paying attention. They're mindful. I'm just saying they will make acquisitions closer to the top of the market, just on the basis of the brand will have to be really proven out, for them to buy. I think they'll be, they may acquire companies, but what I'm noticing in their strategy more is buying brands. Like Coca-Cola and a lot of these places, they'll look to buy brands, right? Or what they always look to acquire is who has the expertise that I don't have, right? That's why I think the cultivation has been talked down by so many people, and yet it is the foundational piece that drives this entire business. So the reason that the prices are still so robust in California, despite a vibrant black market and all that kind of stuff, is because nobody's as good at cultivating marijuana at scale as everybody thought. So when you look at the numbers 3 years ago, you'd think we'd be down to it's only going to cost a few $100s to produce a pound in a greenhouse, and it's not, right? The prices have been stable to actually even going up in a lot of cases, right?
And it takes time to build this type of business. It's not like PayPal where you can build $1 billion business in 1 year, because it's not technology. It's not like something that can be, you have to build the actual facility.
It's a very finicky,
you ever
fussy.
Dealt with a city? What I mean? You have to build the actual facility.
Yeah, it's
a real hands-on.
Even when we use that Coca-Cola analogy, or talk about, you're talking about sugar and water being infused in through a system that's just on a bottling line that's very mechanical. There's no love, care, attention, the monitoring that has to go on. You're not worried about, hey, we have, bugs and mold and this kind of stuff that predominantly, these are not issues when you're dealing with most of these other consumer packaged products. So it's got and that's why I was thinking it will command a slightly higher multiple into the markets, which nobody really knows what that multiple is going to be yet, because it's still to be determined. We're still in that early on in the industry, but it's because it's not just a consumer-based product, right? Like where it's like, it's just like you mix this and this and this and this and this, and with all these chemicals that we don't even know what they're named, and you just throw them all together, and that becomes the product. It's like this is every, regardless of how consistent the strains are, all that kind of stuff. We're so far away from that level of consistency, and you probably never even want that in the industry ultimately. So it's still going to be that craft style appeal, even if it's on a mega scale, it has to have that craft kind of care, touch, and attention, right? So
this is the last one. Arthur Jones said, it said, I see you've been successful in other industries. You talked about that with the things you've done. Why go into cannabis now? I think you answered that, the team. And
the U.S. marketplace is being
the
so
US
untapped.
marketplace.
I mean,
Yeah, do you just want to be a part of a new trend, or did you see an opportunity to make some big profit somewhere down the line? And I think we definitely have that goal. Let me know what you think. I'm very curious how you saw the vision to do this, and that's
yeah, that was really. I mean, that's almost how the entire business plan kind of started to come together. Was we started looking at the industry and seeing like, okay, where is it? If you're going to sell, you need to sell to the most vibrant market, and that's why you have to be in California, right? Ultimately, you have to be in California. I mean, it's basically its own country. I think it's number 5. If it was a country, it would be the 5th largest GDP in the world just as a state, right? So you have to be there. There's a strong tie. California, all the West Coast is where, and something that was said by, that we've talked about, a number of times is like all the cool brands always come out of California.
yeah.
Right.
Clothing,
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's jeans,
music.
if it's music, it's
Yeah,
all comes out of California. So you see, so it's a natural progression. So the way that Sugarleaf is like the university, if you want to call it that, where it's a smaller operation, but is to me.
By the way, I don't mind the Pacific Northwest. We've had just a few brands like Boeing, Microsoft,
Amazon, I think we covered,
just
right?
a couple.
So there's if
It's
you're
a
gonna
good place to start.
If you're gonna start something that is gonna be successful from the stock side, seems like Washington is not a bad place to do it.
No.
Washington State is a good spot to do it. So I think that's a really
It's
cool.
true. Everything
point,
cool
right?
comes from New York, which I was just across the water from there in New Jersey, where we're starting,
Yeah.
and California. One of
Yeah.
the two major, big, influential places. Like I said, culture comes from there. Our music, everything.
It is the bedrock of the
Entertainment.
of the U.S., right? It's just like, yeah, I mean, music being the epitome of that with New York, Chicago versus the West Coast and all that kind of stuff. But no, I think it's a really exciting time. As much as I know that it's very, very challenging for investors now. They're maybe invested. It's like you do weather these things if you're in the right companies, right? And that's. I mean, I think we're going to scale up our level of communication and our level of actually doing deals and transactions from the Chemistree side, because people are becoming quite rational now as to the type of metrics we're doing. And if they come in for a tour of looking at the Washington facility and can see how well the team can help them in their goals, I'm telling you, like, and this came to me from one of our partners in California, and they said, you're just starting to see the real advent of companies and businesses starting to get into trouble and fail, like what we saw in Washington, years ago, or at least a year and a half ago, is now starting in the California marketplace, where maybe people had more money, took a little longer and stuff like this, but eventually the business cycle catches. If you're not a good operator, that's eventually going to happen. So I think you're going to see two interesting things that are going to help us align in California. One is the actual compression of to the business and difficulty and underfunding and normally some of the challenges that the people at Sugarleaf originally faced, right? Undercapitalized, not the experience and stuff like that. The broadness of the team and scope of the team to help out in all facets, the costing and being able to get great deals on supplies and all the different other parts for the business. But the other thing that is really your friend is the East Coast opening up. So you've also got a lot of heavy duty successful operators out of California that are now starting to look over at the East Coast going, I need a piece of that action, and particularly if I'm going to be a big operator. So they're sometimes looking through their portfolio of asset holdings and looking to rationalize some of those and go, I own 3 successful farms in California. You know what? I'd be happy to sell some of an interest or maybe one of my farms to capitalize me, because I got to get over to New York or to Chicago or to Illinois or New Jersey or wherever that's going to be. And I think that's going to start playing into people, because that whole landscape is opening up. Like I say, it's like, it's hard because you see the same stuff every day, you focus on the stock price. And that's why I read stuff like The Green Entrepreneur and MJ Biz and stuff that really don't focus that much on the stock prices, right? They focus on where the what the developments of the industry are happening with that. I think that's key, right? Like, so if as long as you as an investor, can tick like, yeah, the team knows what they're doing. Like, if you don't have confidence in the team, then just sell the stock and you know what I mean, and find one that you do have in, or never invest in it again. But if you can give the management group and look through their bios and say, can these guys actually, have they done what they say they can do? Have they been career cult of personality guys in it? Yes, if you can give them that, then the rest is just giving the pages for the different business objectives to work through, right? And that's what's been, I think, the toughest part on the U.S. side is it's taken a lot longer for people to actually see. I think people, very typical like Toronto investment banking people sort of thought like, oh, the U.S. is going to legalize in no time. Trump's going to beat the Democrats to legalizing it way before the election and this. And listen, the states moves at the pace that it does for a reason that it does. I still think it's going to be at least a year probably before we get even into moving the Safe Banking Act.
Yeah.
I think it might be, but my point is to investors, if you have even a modicum of patience, like you actually don't want full legalization too soon in the U.S. If it takes 2-3 years, that gives you the time to acquire the best companies, because once the legalization happens, as we've seen in Canada,
it's too late.
That's your almost top of the market. You either A, won't ever be able to buy the companies as cheaply as you will because it'll already be priced in, or literally what we've seen is within a few months, that's normally the top of the market and it's over. So then they start trading back to the traditional consumer discretionary metrics. So that's what the problem is. You were seeing, we were talking to analysts when we were out, in Toronto doing our debenture raise, and we said, well, how are you valuing these companies? That's the number one thing you look at, right? And, well, guys would talk about 15 times next year's trailing revenues, 20 times, how do you even put like, that's insane, right? Not even, I think Uber right now is trading at like 4.5. Okay, like, do you know what I mean? So, these are just like numbers that didn't make. So you knew the rationalization was going to happen. So I think that's sometimes why we were a little oblivious to it, because in our world, we just looked at it like, we're like, oh my gosh, a reckoning's coming. And it's coming hard, and it did. Of course, you don't gain any friends by running out and telling everybody a reckoning's coming and things are going to go to heck in a handbasket. Nobody wants to hear that, right? It's the Chicken Little, right? Everybody's like, the sky's falling, the sky's falling. Everybody's like, get out of here. But we sort of said like the most money we could make is by sticking to our knitting, in helping to support our friends at Sugarleaf, and then just sitting on your hands and waiting and letting like the business cycle actually come through to these guys. And now I think it's exciting because we're just starting to see deals that to me are really starting to look like they make a lot of sense. And able to do business with guys that are understanding like, yes, I see the value of the team. In the chemistry, they see the value. They see the mistakes that other guys have made and where they may have partnered with other different Canadian operators and stuff like that, and have the foresight to kind of go, okay, I understand that now is when I've got a position. If I'm in the States, that if I really want to crystallize some of this type of success in 2 years as legalization happens or whatever, I need to be, the smarter operators for sure are seeing I need to do it now. So it's either that I'm upside down and they're in a fair bit of pain, where it's like I have to pull the chute and have a chance to see that, or I won't ever see it, or they realize that you're going to need that capital to expand for that coming, because you're going to see enormous amounts of capital come down that will interfere with your business model if you're not have partners that are well enough capitalized to do that when it comes, right? So,
Kirk, glad we did this.
JD, always a
And
pleasure, man.
we will
Thank
do
you.
this again. So.
Yeah, I look forward to doing it, and to the Chemistree shareholders, I'm very grateful for their participation in the company, and I hope that we are always available. People can email our info at Chemistree. We'll endeavor to get back to everybody. It is the lifeblood of what fuels the team. We're great for the capital and the support that people have given us, and I think by doing more of these type of things, we can probably be better at communicating the initiatives that we're up to, and what I think is they will be as excited as we are about the journey that we're going on.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, JD. Appreciate it.